Hello, thank you so much for the introduction. I am super excited to be here. I could barely keep up in the chat. Keep it coming. Loving to hear where you all are attending school or where you're currently located. My name is Mallory Rogers. I work with the recruiting team and have the pleasure of being our event team lead. So we get to help put on awesome events like this, as well as many others. So we're super excited to be partnering with Way Up. Today, kicking off our first event. We'll be having a total of 3 events this fall in partnership with Way Up, but don't want you to think that's all we do event-wise. So we have a lot more events. We'll make sure you all have access to additional events to continue to engage with us throughout the fall season. I attended James Madison University, so go Dukes. If there's any Dukes on the call, I love it. In Harrisonburg, Virginia. So I had a shout out where I went to school. But really looking forward to being here today. Today's event will really be a tech talk focus. So we have an amazing guest speaker, Mikela. I've heard her present before and it's fantastic. So you all are in for an absolute treat. My colleague Amy and I will be managing the Q&A. So any recruiting questions, any questions you have related to Capital One, Amy and I can tackle that in the Q&A. And then any questions you really have for Mikela related to her presentation or experience at Capital One, we will have time at the end to direct any specific Q&A questions to her in her presentation at the end. So I'm looking forward to engaging with you all in the Q&A throughout the event and excited to be here. So we did get a lot of questions in registration asking, are you all hiring? Yes, we are hiring. The best place to go is going to be our Way Up company profile page. Highly recommend clicking follow at the top of that company profile page. Don't worry, we'll be sharing it a couple times in the chat throughout the session. So go ahead and hit follow. And then it also is going to showcase all of our open events. The best place to learn more about these opportunities is our careers page, which we'll also be sharing throughout the event. So we'll make sure you're in good hands to be equipped with all the information on the programs that we're currently hiring for and learning a little bit more of Capital One in that process. So with that, I'm going to complete my spiel and hand it over to Mikela to really kick off her presentation, share a little bit more about life at Capital One and lessons learned in the cloud. Thanks, Mikela.
Yes, thank you, Mallory. Hello, everyone. I love the energy in the chat. I just wanted to shout that out and keep the energy going. My name is Mikela Wright, and I am a software engineering manager here at Capital One. And today, I will be walking through the lessons learned from the cloud, which is going to be both a technical and professional journey. So before I jump into that, let's learn a little bit more about me. So as I mentioned, I'm a software engineering manager in our enterprise data and machine learning space. I focus on accounting applications that pretty much keep the business a business. If you don't know where your money is going, how can you run an effective business? So I'm building technology there and leading a team of full stack engineers. I joined Capital One as a college hire through the technology development program, and I've stayed at Capital One since. Last month, I hit my 10-year anniversary, which is surreal to me because I was one of those people that felt like I would never stay at a company longer than 3 years. But here I am, 10 years in, working in various parts of the business, various roles, and I'll share my journey as I go along in the presentation. I'm a certified Amazon Web Services Solutions Architect, which is big because we're talking about the cloud, and AWS is a primary cloud provider that we use here at Capital One. I graduated from Virginia Tech, so go Hokies, and I have an engineering degree, so industrial and systems engineering degree. So if there's any other ISC or graduates or folks studying ISC or even any Hokies, feel free to drop it in the chat. And thank you all for the congratulations. I am a big advocate in diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and I'm passionate about STEM programs because those are the type of programs that spark the interest in me to pursue engineering. One thing that is missing from this slide is that I said that I would never code. When I say never, is bold, it was italicized, If I could have a mug, a t-shirt, and a headband that said I would never code, that was my mindset. So today, I am going to share with you all one of my biggest and scariest projects. So how did I even get into this space, which was on premise into the cloud migration and a data transformation while navigating the imposter syndrome. I feel like it's important to combine these tech efforts with imposter syndrome because throughout my career, I noticed that there was a theme. I will always find myself following my curiosity. And I feel like folks that are interested in STEM has a curiosity for solving problems or figuring out why. And when I chose to switch from focusing solely on ISE and taking a career in IT/technology, I found myself battling the imposter syndrome. So the objective of this talk is to give an engaging presentation, and I want it to be interactive. Feel free to use the Q&A. There will be time where I'll address, if I see some questions pop up, I'll try to get to them quickly during the presentation. The other key thing is I'm going to highlight lessons learned during a cloud migration. So those are those technical learnings. And I'm also going to walk through my journey on how I conquered the imposter syndrome and how I continue to use this method called the Aspire method that I created to venture through those feelings. So I'm excited to smash and merge both the technical world and the professional world because they go hand in hand. And me being a living oxymoron, because I said I would never code, and now I will never leave software engineering technology, I'm excited to share this journey. So here's how our journey to the cloud is going to be broken into 5 major chunks. So first, I'm going to give an introduction. I'm going to explain what a cloud migration is and the imposter syndrome. Then next, you'll see that there's 3 major chunks. So you'll see planning, migration, and post-migration. Those are 3 major segments in a whole migration, and I'll cover them in those 3 categories. And then in the end, we'll do a review and then a Q&A. I may feel like I'm browsing or speeding through some of the topics, but that is in no way for me to not acknowledge your questions. There's quite a bit of content, so feel free, like I said, use the Q&A and we'll get to those questions as soon as we can. So let's get started with the intro. So in 2015 and 2016, Capital One publicly announced the strategy to migrate all of our infrastructure to the public cloud. At the time, this was unheard of for a financial services company, and majority of the companies to just go all in the clouds. And what all in means was everything. Nothing would remain under the control of Capital One infrastructure. So what is a cloud migration? A cloud migration is the process of moving business operations, applications, infrastructure, and or data into the cloud. So from our standpoint, we're going to call on-premise what we own and what we manage in the data centers. And the public cloud means someone else owns and manages the data centers. Another way of looking at it is I have a laptop with a lot of data in it. Maybe I will put it in a jump drive and function and put it in your laptop and completely operate all of my systems using your machine. That's layman's terms, but hopefully you get the gist. So in this use case, what we'll be doing is cutting off our user experience from using data centers and infrastructure that we owned, and we meaning Capital One, and migrating this into the public cloud. In addition, we have to make sure we switch over all of the user experience to start consuming data and for the users to interact with the cloud without realizing anything was moved at all. So in a cloud migration, I said that everything must go. So for the sake of this use case, we're going to focus on a 3-tier architecture application. So this means an application will have 3 tiers of architecture. One, the presentation tier will be UI, or the user interface. The application tier, that's where the business logic and the function and a lot of the code houses in the application tier. And then you have the data tier. So think about database servers, file servers, and shares, and any access to data coming in and out. Now, at the time of this project, I was a junior associate. I had just I was new to the team, and I did have a track record of already completing some complex projects. However, when I was assigned this piece of the pie, I was very, very shocked. So I want you all to role play with me and say, with the skills that you have right now, you are now the tech lead. So that means that you are responsible for transforming and moving highly regulated and important data from on-premise to AWS. These are critical accounting applications. So we have to get this right. I see an example of some of these accounting applications would be the general ledger, balancing the books, and just different things that you would do to report finances to external entities. Now, we're only going to focus on migrating the data tier of the 3-tiered application. You must be the transformation and the delivery lead. So in this role, I would have to design, build, and deploy reusable patterns safely and on time. I needed to be the application subject matter expert, and that's also known as SME. So subject matter expert means that I need to know the user needs, I need to know the internal data, the external data, compliance, government regulations when it comes to this data, industry standards, company standards. I needed to know the data in and out. And then on top of that, I had to understand and know the cloud. I had to architect all of these solutions using cloud-based solutions. So I had to give strategy and technical direction to data engineers and software engineers. In addition, I would have to collaborate with stakeholders on the business part. So to make sure that, hey, if I'm using this application, what is going to change from my perspective, and articulating all of that. So those were the expectations and responsibility of this role as tech lead in the cloud migration. Now look at it from my perspective. I started looking at my current experience and saying, okay, I'm new to data engineering. I promise to you, it was like I was no more than 6 months into data engineering and understanding how to build data pipelines. So if I had to rate from 1 to 10, I was at probably a 2 or a 1.5. I think I'm being nice with the 2, but that's besides the point. I just really felt like I had a lot to learn about data engineering. The second thing is I needed to be an applications lead, but I was the newest member on this application team. And I left this out of on the first slide, but I wasn't just migrating for one app. It was 8 accounting applications that I needed to consider. So I had less than a year of hands-on experience with the applications, back end and understanding the database. And I just joined that team to add this tech edge. So I had a lot to learn. And then I realized that I did have project lead experience, but this was a technical lead experience. So I had experience with applications that were COT. So COT stands for commercial off the shelf. So you can think of it as an application that is already built and we purchased to use it, and we just build around the app. So I had experience with building around the application, but actually building something in-house and migrating something from scratch, that was really new to me. So the more that I started to look at the role and the more I started to compare my experience, and my confidence began to drop. I questioned, why was I chosen to lead this? Do I have what it takes to lead? And imposter syndrome began to creep in, despite how excited I was that this was a huge opportunity. So what is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is a collection of feelings of inadequacy that persist despite your evident success is a series of feeling self-doubt and a sense of intellectual fraudulence. There's this notion of, am I supposed to know this? Am I going to get found out? If it's found out that I don't know this, do I belong? That is pretty much the feeling of imposter syndrome. At times, people may be unable to internalize their accomplishments despite how successful they are and still have doubt on, can I do this? Or do I belong? I do want to call out that this is not an official diagnosis listed in the Manual of Mental Disorders, but is a common term to define those feelings of self-doubt. So at this point in time of my career, I noticed throughout my life, when I decided to change the industry that I was going to apply for. So instead of ISC only, I said, I'm going to try technology. When I decided to go to Virginia Tech, there were things that I had to acclimate into, I had to learn. It was a different background for me to just assimilate or figure out, where do I fit? So when I got to this project, I said, I'm going to do more research on the imposter syndrome, because this is really occurring to me. And I decided to take the imposter syndrome and treat it like it was an actual problem that I needed to solve. So in my research, I found that there are 5 patterns of the imposter syndrome, and an expert, Valerie Young, defined them in this manner. So you have the perfectionist. A perfectionist is one of the people that sets very high expectations, and completing 99% of their goals feel like failure. The expert's pattern needs to know every piece of information. This is a person that will not feel comfortable raising their hand or being assigned something unless they know every piece of information. The natural genius. The natural genius easily attain new skills. So this is that person that you may show a complex or just walk them through something, and then they're like, oh, I get it. And the fact that they are able to retain or learn something quickly, that increases their confidence. So they get skills with little to no effort. Soloist. A soloist needs to accomplish things on their own to feel successful. So success to them is not asking for help. And then you have your superheroes. Superheroes work harder to prove their worth. There's a difference between working harder because you want something to be, perfect or it's passionate. But when you're working harder to prove your worth, that is considered the superhero pattern. So let's look at some of the triggers. So here are some of the stressors that cause the feeling of inadequacy or self-doubt or fraud. So a perfectionist, if they make a mistake, that may resonate with the lack of competence or ability. So a mistake is not necessarily considered learning. A mistake could necessarily be a question of, do I even belong in this role, or can I even do this because I made a mistake? It was not perfect. The experts are triggered when they don't know the answer. Not knowing the answer makes them feel inadequate to accomplish the role or accomplish the task. The natural genius. If it takes a natural genius to learn something a little longer than normal, then they equate that as triggering the self-doubt. I had to study 2 hours extra to understand this one concept. Maybe I'm not good at it. Maybe I'm not fit for it. More effort means not good enough. Then you have the soloist. Soloist feels like asking for help is failure. Asking for help feels like fraud. So anytime they have to reach out, or anytime someone else is brought in to help move things along, they may take that as self-doubt or feeling like they don't belong on that assignment. And then superheroes. Superheroes are a little interesting because sometimes you're working hard just to get something done. but it's a difference because you were working hard to prove your worth. So when you get little validation after working that hard, that makes you question, I put all this work to show them that I did this, and all they said was, oh, okay, great. ... Those feelings and those stressors of self-doubt can come into play. So I'll share some of the patterns that I've encountered. So when I was in college, natural genius was one that I identified with a lot, because in high school, it just came easy for me. Studying, what is studying? And when I was in high school, I was at the top of my class. I was one of those, I just had all of these accolades. So when I got into college and really had to study, it was just a whirlwind of, did I choose the right major? Should I follow my interests? Should I, it was a lot of questioning because it took certain parts of the engineering for me to grasp. And I'll even go a step further and say, for computer science specifically, even though I was interested in technology, the fact that it just took me a little longer than it would if I was doing something in statics or dynamics, I just felt like computer science was not necessarily for me. Now, I love my major ISE. I feel like I made the right decision, but the fact that I turned away because I was having that self-doubt versus I'm not interested is what triggered. Is that we are not alone. Research suggests that 70% of people will experience imposter syndrome at least once in their career. And there's another statistic that I found after I created this presentation that says in technology itself, 58% of technologists express feeling imposter syndrome. So it's way more common than you think. And this aligned with, as I got on this project and talked to senior leaders and people that I looked up to in the field, they would kind of share, like, I'm not sure if I'm fit for it. And they would experience imposter syndrome. So that's why I felt it was so important to merge these two topics together. So you know that usually imposter syndrome is the start of any big initiative that we take on in technology. And also, research shows that imposter syndrome hit minority groups even harder. And I can identify with that because there's a sense of just needing to know your job and learning the content. But when you look at different, when you go beyond the role, the project, the task, you have an environment. And an environment typically has a culture. And you also have to figure out, where do I fit in culture-wise in addition to the work-wise? So here's a quote from a famous, and I feel like one of the most brilliant minds, that says, "The exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler." Now, who could have said this? It is amazing. It blew my mind to say that Albert Einstein, one of the most brilliant minds, felt like an imposter in his own field. So I wanted to just reiterate and drive the point that when you're in STEM, when you're in technology, we are inventors. We are solving problems at times that has never been solved. So you'll be in that space of, can I really do this? Right? So let's go back into the tech side and let's talk about career planning, the cloud planning phase of the project. So I did my research on imposter syndrome, but at the time I just knew I had the imposter syndrome. So the journey begins. I want you to, if you're looking at the image, you'll see that there's two adults. One guy has his shoes in his hand, somebody's holding a water bottle, and they're walking up this hill. And evidently it must be comfortable enough for, he has his shoes off and having a water bottle, and they're just looking like they're talking to each other. So the journey begins. Leadership shared the vision. We're going to be all in the cloud. So then the project kicked off. Now, if you look at the picture completely, you'll see that there's a little child walking behind, nothing in their hands, I mean, no one besides, so she might be talking to herself, but really focused on step by step. That's how I felt at the start of this project. I just felt like there were folks that were comfortable, bigger, knew more, comfortably walking and starting this project. And I just had so much to start with. The unknowns dominated. Where do I begin? So I took a step back and I realized that these were some three key steps that, and this applies to even outside of cloud migrations, even application builds, that really helped me to plan. Understand the need. So what is the why for the application? Assess, define, and select the scope, and then prepare a plan for each piece of scope that I ended up defining. So here are 6 key takeaways in the planning phase that I learned and for you to consider in the future. Understand your customers, not only the users of the application, which is typically the product side or the business side, but your technical users as well. Identify the scope and dependencies of the application, capture your assumptions, reframe the status quo mindset, get continuous feedback and approvals, and scale your team to the solution, not the solution to the team. So let's go in deeper. Understand your customer. So it's easy to identify at times, identify what you know and identify what you do not know. So remember, this application that we were migrating, they've been at Capital One for years. So you have people that know the data in and out. But it's still important to ask those questions. And during a migration, this is the time for you to understand the business need. What are you really needing this application for? And then determine how and where the data is being used. So I also want to remind you that we are migrating the data aspect of the entire application. So understand how the data is being used, where the data is being used, understand the bad stuff. What is going wrong right now in this application? What do you constantly have to fix? And then once you kind of clean slate, ask those questions, identify what you know, and typically is what you think you know, what you don't know, understand the business need, determine what the data is being used for, know the bad stuff, then you'll dive into those technical aspects of the project. So if you remember, I showed a triangle of the 3-tier architecture, and I showed a big slice of data storage and access. It's very important. One of the things that I found useful, and I feel like this is my secret sauce whenever I'm put on a project, is being able to take a large piece of scope and define, slice, and solution that slice of scope. So I was able to look at data, and then I broke it into 2 major groups. Okay, we have data at rest, so data that just sits there. And then we have data in motion, which are like the pipelines to get data in, or the data that continues to change based on user input. And I came out with breaking the project into chunks similar to how you see in this data storage and access tier. So in order for me to do that, that first bullet, reframe the status quo mindset. Typically during a tech modernization and even migration to the cloud, it's so easy to be stuck on, well, this is how we do it today. But we have the fun of envisioning how it should be in the future and envisioning how we can make it better. This is the time to flex our tech muscles and our visionary skills and just, automate processes and make processes more efficient. Then do your analysis on the subcategories that I mentioned earlier. So as you break the work down, dive deeper into those categories. Time box, don't dive too deep because we had to do this within a year turnaround and it was 8 applications. So just make sure you dive deep, but time box. Now, as you're doing your research, what I noticed that's helpful to help me not go into a rabbit hole is get to a point where you just make an assumption. and draft out your assumptions after you finish an analysis, and then seek to make those assumptions, turning those into facts. If I took every assumption and tried to dig every time I got a little stuck in a problem, it would take a long time. So some of the good things to do is to say, okay, for data access, I'm going to assume that population A needs this, population B needs this. This is an assumption. I'm going to validate that and confirm that later. Let me move to the next section. After you summarize and get your assumptions, have your facts, then determine what is in scope and what is out of scope. Now, I'm going to go a little bit off the presentation record and just share with you a secret that I realized that happens in the software engineering community a lot. When we love to build, we love to create, and sometimes we don't necessarily ask our customer or ask the product team, what is really important to you? What is in scope? What can be out of scope? And anytime that you are pressed with a tight deadline, it is okay to ask what is extremely important to have versus what is something that we can cut out or even potentially build later. Once you identify what's in scope and out of scope, then you'll address the dependencies. And it's important to realize dependencies isn't just who gets the data. Dependencies can be internal to Capital One. So I'm in accounting, you have someone in card that uses data, and then you can have even outside of the company. So you can have external companies that send data, or we provide data to external companies and applications. So understand those dependencies. This is really critical whenever you're talking about data, because if you turn something off, it's almost like cutting a vein off in the body. You just never know which what will get clogged, right? So it's really important to understand the MVP, or the minimum viable product, and then address those dependencies. All right, so I'm going to speed through because I am a little behind schedule, but then you'll prepare your strategy. In a cloud migration, there are different methods. So you have rehost, which is lifting and shifting, refactor. Refactoring means that you are going to actually change parts of the code, but it's not a complete rebuild. You're just doing minimal to low code aspects to get the application to work. You have platform, you have hybrid. I use hybrid at one point as an interim. Hybrid means you have parts of your infrastructure on-prem, so stuff that we own, and you have part of it in the cloud. You have a replacement, which means we're not even going to use this app anymore. We're going to find another application, or we're going to build it completely, or we don't even want this function at all anymore. So we've sliced and diced. We've figured out the methods that we used, and then prepare consensus. When you're on a project, especially of this magnitude and importance, I highly recommend, and I learned that reviewing early and often is key. One of the things that helped me along the way was, as soon as I kind of gathered something, I would share a status the next day. So having daily stand-ups, having weekly check-ins with all of your stakeholders to clearly communicate your logic and your reasoning when making those decisions is really helpful. That third bullet, I feel like, was a major key in making sure things moved along. Cross-functional reviews means invite any and everybody that may be interested in your project and have one meeting. Sometimes you think you need to have only a meeting with the business or a meeting with cyber. This project required me to work with architects, cyber, our compliance team, our users, other tech leads, and then I'm learning. And it was just so much that just putting everyone in one meeting created this culture of getting continuous feedback. And it even brought up solutions and issues that may have not happened if I was just meeting with one group at a time. You address your dependencies again. You'll take notice that I'm calling out dependencies quite a bit, and create a backup plan. The planning phase has a lot of content in it because I feel like this is the most important. Take note, we're the tech lead, right? I haven't even talked about building code yet, or even implementing a solution. Have a backup plan. It is terrifying to migrate, completely decommission an application, and you're not sure that if something goes wrong, what you would do. So having a backup plan is your friend. So have a contingency plan. So was I triggered by imposter syndrome? Yes, yes, capital yes. I experienced the expert pattern, but at the time, I didn't know that what the expert pattern was. I was really triggered by not knowing the answer. But what helped me get to realize that, okay, I'm experiencing the expert pattern is I created the Aspire method. So if you remember, I said that I sat down one day and I said, I'm going to solve this feeling, this imposter syndrome, like I would do any other technical problem, math problem. I'm just going to solve it out and come up with a method to overcome it. And then Aspire came through because I said, you know what? I want to aspire to overcome this feeling. And I created this method, an acronym. So A, acknowledge how you feel, shift to the positive, pinpoint the trigger, identify a solution, reframe your mindset, and execute your plan. So let's look at this live. I sat down, came up with this cute little acronym and these steps. And at the time, I'm like, I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I'm going to really map this out. So A, how did I feel? Be transparent in this moment. It is okay. I felt underqualified for such a high visibility and complex effort, right? Then I said, okay, I feel underqualified, but let me shift to the positive. I said, this is a great professional and technical opportunity, and I have a great track record for completing complex projects. Okay, shift to the positive. So P, let me pinpoint the trigger. So I went back to those five pillars, and I said, I feel the most with the expert, like the fact that I just don't know. There's just so many different pieces. So I identified the expert pattern. Then I set up time with SMEs, which is identifying the solution. And then you'll see R. You may think reframe the mindset. How is that different from shifting to the positive? What I noticed when I was going through this process is when I come up with a solution, that introduced the opportunity for me to doubt myself again. Like, oh my gosh, do they want to speak to me? Should I know this, and the third? But so that's why I put that second mindset check to say, reframe the mindset again. So I said, this is new and learning is normal. So that helped me kind of solidify the solution, pump me up a little bit and say, okay, now let me execute my plan. It may seem so simple to say, if you don't know something, ask, but this helps with other triggers too. So I ended up meeting with my manager. I was a lot more structured with saying, these are the things that I don't know, and this is what I need. And was able to go through that planning phase that I just shared in a lot more confident way. So the migration, we're going to jump back into this migration phase. Extract, transform, and load. In data engineering, ETL is a commonly used concept to copy or migrate data to the destination. Here are four major keys whenever you're consider the migration, the actual build. So data quality and compliance matters. End-to-end test or bust. Build great pipelines and be agile, adjust, and communicate. So building a great pipeline requires you to build something that's available, reliable, reusable, and scalable. When your back is against the wall with the time, check for reuse before you build from scratch. Reuse can be within your team, it could be within the company, it could even potentially be an open source application that you can contribute back. So as you're looking at your operation 1, operation 2, operation 3, look for things that you can reuse before you build. It'll save you time. Also, to make progress, think of interim solutions versus long-term solutions. Sometimes you can mentally get bogged up on, oh my goodness, this is the target state. We need it to be completely perfect. But you can build a hut to live in until you get into the big house. So that interim solution can require different methods. For example, I called out that I use the hybrid method. So I proposed where some data was in the cloud, some of the components was on-prem, but we were still working towards the long-term solution and was able to see progress and tests. Compliance. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and skip to the bottom because the bottom bullet pretty much sums up everything at the top. Make sure you test, test, test. Do not slack on end-to-end testing. If you know that every time you put A is always return this every time that you've done it, still put A, because you're going to be in the cloud. You never know what could change. Make sure you use and start with accurate and production-like data. Clean data reduces the risk of you having to do rework in the future. And building great pipelines, especially in the cloud, there are so many different services that you could use, right? And this is your time to, like I said, flex the tech muscles and learn different things and design. So what I'm showing you now are AWS services that we used at Capital One to build our data migration pipelines and still use today for some of our data movements, which is Lambda, EC2. You have S3, which is the simple storage service. A lot of the networking and access. However, I want to call out that one size does not fit all. So that's why I said you have to do your research, because in compute, Lambda serverless, that is a buzzword to go completely serverless. We don't have to really manage anything, but there's a 15-minute processing limit. So if I have a process that's 16 minutes, it's going to completely fail. So in those type of architecture use cases, you'll have to look for EC2 or or another type of compute. So I do want to call out that is very important for you to keep in mind. Awesome. So I'm doing okay with time now. I done sped up. So feel free to ask questions if there's anything else. So the final stage of the migration, which is post-migration. Here are 4 major keys. Validate and check it twice. So what do I mean from validate? Validate means is running on premise. So is the application and the data is being used in the old world, and the application is now being used in the cloud. Parallel run. So that's that second bullet. Do not rush the parallel run. You want to compare the results of the two and give yourself enough time for any issues that may pop up in the cloud. Document your bugs and the learnings. So I'll share a quick story. During the validation phase, I felt like I could put a superhero, cape on, because we didn't have any issues for like 3 months. And this is an accounting. And in accounting, you got to think of things as monthly, quarterly, and yearly. So when we approached the end of the 3rd month, which is a quarter, we got our first bug. Now imagine if I was a tech lead and I said, you know what, we've been great for 3 months. Let's go ahead and close the process. We would have been, as a term called out back, we would have been left without a backup plan to keep the business running. So document those bugs and learnings, because it'll be helpful in the future. And remember, this last bullet, your journey is just beginning. Life in the cloud is when the real fun begins. We are still modernizing at Capital One, and it's a really great learning experience because it's just really fast paced and you will always learn. So did I experience any other imposter syndrome patterns? Absolutely. I would highlight all of them if I could, but in addition to the expert pattern, for this project specifically, I experienced perfectionist in the beginning and superhero. So perfectionist, I would say, is not necessarily the beginning, but when we got into our builds and started testing, I really felt like I put all of this planning into place. Us not completing a test kind of took a little hit at the confidence, but I was able to use the Aspire method to document and figure out which solutions will help me feel better in that sense. Superhero, since I was junior, and I can kind of comfortably say I was one of the most junior people when I interacted to pitch the pipeline, build the pipeline. I felt like I had to kind of work more to prove, not work more because I was inspired. There's a difference. So I experienced those two patterns. And I want to review now. So feel free to take a screenshot of this. This is the slide that shows each of those bullets or the keys in each phase of a data migration that I felt was valuable. So you have the planning phase. To just highlight some of those in the planning phase, I would say reframe the stat quo mindset. That means that just because this is it today does not mean that this is how it has to be in the future. In the migration phase, end-to-end tests, and I want to say build great pipelines, reframe the status quo mindset. And then in the post-migration, I'll just highlight, make sure you do not rush parallel testing. As a technologist, we also have a responsibility of ensuring that things are safe, secure, and being thoughtful leaders in that space will create a better experience, not only for yourself, but you'll be really thoughtful about your customers and realize that the journey is just beginning. That once you're in the cloud, you really are just starting. And the AWS comes out with services all the time. Things can get faster. So just keep in mind that the journey is just beginning. So here's a summary of the Aspire method. And I will say that this is one of my most proud accomplishments, because sometimes you think there's an idea that only will resonate with you. And I was asked to start sharing, and this has been on my mind for quite a while, combining tech with the soft skills. And I'm just happy that it is resonating and that I can share this method in hopes that you can aspire through imposter syndrome. So a reminder is a feeling of inadequacy. Feel free to acknowledge how you feel, shift to the positive, pinpoint the trigger, identify a solution, reframe the mindset, and execute your plan. And here's a funny little cartoon that kind of says that I finished studying other companies' cloud migration strategies. Close your eyes and hope for the best seems to be the most popular. And that's how I felt. And in any new tech effort, sometimes you are just kind of walking into the blind, because like I said, we're building and solving problems that haven't really been seen before. So I want to encourage you all to aspire and push through. If you want to learn more about Capital One, feel free to use our, I feel like they provided links in the chat, so that'll be more useful. I will put my LinkedIn into the chat. And I will, so here's an even better slide here. So I do have time for questions. Feel free. Mallory, do you have any questions that you can ask?
Mikela, it's hard to keep up with how many people are raving about your presentation. So thank you so much. Amy and I have been busy in the Q&A, but there's some we just can't address because they're directed to you and everyone wants to hear your thoughts. So have a couple of questions lined up, and then we'll drop some of those helpful links into the chat as well. Awesome. So Ishita had a couple questions that I wanted to kick off with today. And Ishita, I hope I got your name correct. First question is, how do you stay motivated throughout your imposter syndrome? So do you mind sharing a little bit behind that motivation and how you continue to progress?
Yes, that is a great question. I feel like motivation for me applies to my interests. So one of the things that I constantly reference was I was still interested in it, but I would have self-doubt. So if you ever face an obstacle, ask yourself, am I interested in this? Like, really, am I really interested in this? If you are, then go through the Aspire method to see if it's a notion of self-doubt. If you're not interested in it, then that's grounds for you to not necessarily be motivated if you're not interested in it. But the motivation for me comes with being interested, seeing this through. I was very motivated to say I migrated this into the cloud. it was massive, but I was just so curious about getting into the cloud. And that, looking at the bigger goal, the end picture, typically helps you refocus or reframe the mindset. Sometimes shifting to the positive can be looking at the bigger goal. And there will be times where there's just some tasks that you really are not interested in. But I would say this is going to help me with the larger goal. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, feel free to give some clarity, and I'll give more context.
Great.
And thank you
Thanks
all for sharing your feedback. I'm really humbled and excited that the message resonates, because I want to keep as many people interested
Yay.
as possible.
You're definitely doing that. The next question we have is from Kate. Kate asked, you said you never used code when you first started, which was the first language. What was the first language you chose to learn and why?
I would say English. No, but I get what you're saying. When I decided to switch from, I was in a role called business systems analyst, and that was hands off keyboard. So when I decided to switch to software engineering, it was Java, Spring Java. And I would say the best method and that was just because that was the stack that the application was using. But what helped me learn on the fly was understanding test cases. So I told my team that I would learn test cases and write the test cases. And doing that helped me understand and get in the mindset of a software engineer. And I will admit, to this day, if I had to say I was a proficient coder, like the master coder, I am not. And that was one of the things that I had to face when I was with the expert pattern. I felt like technical lead meant that I needed to be a master coder. And that's not it. There's so many other elements in guiding a team. So if I had to recommend right now a language for for someone that's not necessarily proficient in coding or proficient in coding and want to master, I would say Python. I just feel like it's more straightforward to kind of jump into. But at the time it was Java Spring, and it was interesting. I did well. And a fun story is, even though I was doing well in that role, and I was still getting opportunities, do you know, I let imposter syndrome run me out of that role. So I ended up saying, oh, I can't code. So I had a coding role at Capital One. From leadership said I was doing great, but inside I was like, I'm having doubt. And that's how I even got into this department. I was running away from coding, and within 6 months, I was given this project. So it's come full circle.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
No problem.
We have another question from Ashwin regarding imposter syndrome. Ashwin said, asking plenty of questions is always good, but sometimes I get worried my questions will indicate that I'm not a good fit for my role, or that I'm clueless to my manager or higher ups. And I was wondering if you experienced that as well, and how you really got past that. I know I can definitely relate to sometimes asking too many questions is like, should I know this? Do other people know this? And it's a constant, mind chatter going on. So excited to hear your response here.
That is a great and tricky question, because it's like, when do you turn the faucet off for your manager? One of the things that I realized that helped me in this project while I was trying to learn JavaScript and everything is start to network. Reach out to someone that you think know that answer to, so you don't have to always tap that one resource. And that's a way of saying, okay, I'm asking my manager something that I feel like I should already know. But before I ask, I want to use my network. Now, let's say you don't have a network. Let's say this is a project that you're working on solo, and you're not necessarily sure where to start, what to really ask. Remember, I had that slide that says, identify what you know, identify what you don't know, and make assumptions. Now, one of the things that I do encourage TDP hires, I came in as a TDP, now I'm managing college hires. One thing that happens sometimes, I get concerned if they're not asking enough questions. especially about what we're trying to build, like why we're trying to build it. So structure it to say, I understand this, I don't know this. Let me set some assumptions and approach it in a sense of, I would like to bounce some ideas off of you. Here's, the things that I know, here are gaps, and here are some of the assumptions that are made. I gathered this conclusion, and carry it as a conversation like this, like that, versus just kind of asking, what variable should I use? If you didn't do any research, I'll be like, well, it's in this documentation or something like that. But don't just erase that. Have your manager say that you're asking too many questions before you stop asking questions. Okay. I would encourage that, because you're not expected to know everything. Don't fall into the expert pattern.
Yes, curiosity is praised here at Capital One.
Yes.
Mikela, we're getting a lot of questions around why Capital One, why the Technology Development Program, TDP, as you referred to. Any insights as to like why you chose Capital One and what your experience has been thus far?
Yes, and I will also add why I stayed at Capital One, because I have been tapped by a couple of the big four, and why I've remained at Capital One despite the buzzword companies that may try to recruit. So I chose Capital One, especially the development program, because it gave us a broader sense of community, and it was well structured. I had internships where I would walk in and I'm the only, college aged person. And it's not to sound ageist, but when you're starting off and you're in a completely different state, I had to go to West Virginia. It's a little different. So I went in, did my work, tried to figure things out. I faced that whole notion of, can I ask my boss this? He seems a little annoyed with me coming in, so I'm gonna just base my assumptions, etc. So when I looked for full time, there were a few things that I kept in mind. One, does this company align with my values? Those are some things that you tend to not consider. And does the culture fit with my culture? That internship that I had really made me realize that wasn't the environment that I wanted to be, and which is why I pivoted to explore this more system side of my degree versus the industrial side. So when I got into the TDP program, or when I read about the TDP program, I saw the structure, and I also realized that there were going to be other college hires as well. So if I'm moving to another city, there's other folks that's moving to that city too. And I conduct interviews and do recruiting events. And one of the things that I say is, I'm not selling Capital One. I'm just giving you advice to consider. And this is why I chose the TDP program, but consider these things. So I have a whole network of people that are going through the same thing. It's almost like corporate college at this point. And what has kept me at Capital One is there's a rotation in the TDP program, and I was terrified. I was the first class that did the 2-year rotation. So 1 year you're in a role, you work on a team, and 9 times out of 10 you enjoy the team. So when it gets time to rotate, you're like, oh my gosh, what if I don't like this new team, or what if I don't learn something new? That rotation made me realize how adaptable I was, and it exposed me to other technologies and parts of the company. And rotation and moving around the company is welcomed. And so those were some of the key reasons why I decided to go choose that program versus some of the other offers that I have. And I even declined the return to the internship, was because just that sense of community. And I've stayed because I'm able to do speaking engagements like this. Capital One has hackathons. I was able to travel back to recruit. And there's so many different ways that you can get involved outside of your day-to-day job.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing. And I have to say, Kate is cracking me up in the chat. Kate said, is it the commercials? Is that why you stayed?
You want to know something funny?
Commercials are pretty good.
They are pretty good. And my dad, he is so set on recreating the Jennifer Garner dad commercial when she was I'm like, I'm not going to be in a commercial, Dad. I'm just talking about data migrations.
Maybe one day, you never know. The possibilities are endless.
Shout out to Kate.
Awesome. Well, we're at time now.
Thanks,
Kate is
Kate.
cracking me up. We're at time now. Thank you so much, Mikela, for the wonderful presentation, really being, vulnerable, sharing your journey, your experience at Capital One. And we've gotten to a lot of the questions. We still have a lot of questions hanging out there, but we appreciate you all so much for attending today, engaging in the chat and the Q&A. This was fabulous. We always love interacting with prospective candidates. So thank you for the time. And we've put the Way Up link, the profile page, into the chat. So please go there if you're interested in any open roles at Capital One. It has a lot of great information, and we hope you have fun exploring and learning a little bit more about life at Capital One. So thank you all. We hope to see you at upcoming events, and have a fabulous Wednesday. Thanks again, Mikela.
Thank
Bye,
you all.
everyone.
Have a great one.